Alright, today we're going to be taking apart the Galaxy Note 5. In this video I'm going to show you how to take off the back, replace the screen, the charging port, everything that's inside. You are going to need a heat gun to heat up the back of the phone in order to take off that back piece, as well as a giant suction cup. This particular one is just a windshield mount where you can take your phone and mount it to your car windshield. I'll link all the parts and stuff down in the video description below. Make sure to take out the S pin as well as the SIM card slot, otherwise you'll have problems opening the phone later on. And then heat up the back of the phone. You want to heat it up consistently all over the top and the bottom and the middle of the phone so that it's too hot to touch. Once it's too hot to touch, then you can take your suction cup, put it around the bottom is where I started off with, and then just lift it up just barely enough to slip a metal pry tool underneath. Use a thin metal pry tool. If you use like a razor blade or something thicker, it'll put too much pressure on the glass and it'll break the glass. I've had it happen before. Once the back is up high enough, you can take a playing card or something thin and slide it between the glass and the phone so that it doesn't re-adhere back down to the phone again. If it gets hard, heat up the phone a little bit more because the phone cools down fairly quickly. And so the more you heat up the phone, the easier it is to take off the back. This is a lot harder than it looks. I've sped this part up a little bit so it doesn't take up as much time in the video, but it is really difficult to get the back off of the phone. You can take your playing cards and just kind of slice through the adhesive all the way around the back side. You can see the white adhesive peeling off from the phone, and now the screws. So there are 20 Phillips head screws all the way around the back of the phone. So you can take those off. I will link all the tools you need in the video description below as well. And then the back of the phone will just pop off from the motherboard. You can see that there's a little bit of adhesive along the top there that you have to remove as well. You can see here that there's these contact points for the QI charger. Those will just rest up against the motherboard. And really quickly, I'm going to show you how to replace the camera lens. There's this little groove up along the top. You can just take a razor blade or a thin pry tool and just pop that camera lens off. And the camera lens itself will come in two parts, usually the metal frame and the camera lens. And you'll just adhesive those together and then put your new lens down into place if yours ever gets broken or anything. Pretty straightforward. Now for all these little ribbon cables. They're kind of like Lego pieces. They latch onto the main board. You can just unsnap them. You can see we have the earpiece, then the screen, then down here we have these two wire connections, as well as the little ribbon cable for the fingerprint scanner. And then make sure they're all out of the way while you lift up the motherboard, and there's one more ribbon cable connection right down at the bottom, and that's for the charging port. So snap that off, and then that frees up the motherboard. Now that we have the motherboard, we can look at the cameras. The cameras also have the same ribbon cable connection, also a waffle connection that you can just unsnap like a little Lego piece. You can see both the cameras right here. To snap them back into place, it's also fairly easy. Just take them, line them up over the little slot, and press them down. So here's a little vibrator motor. It's a tiny little guy for such a big phone. You can see both the contact points that just rest up against the motherboard, like a lot of the other components on this phone. So here's the charging port. Kind of an interesting way they installed this thing. There's the two wire cables on top of it, and then one little screw as well that's holding it down. But you can't lift it off at this point because the menu button and the back button are wrapped underneath the glass of the screen. So they're between the plastic and the screen, which is really annoying. And with the Galaxy S6 Edge, it would just pop right off, and then you could replace your charging port right there. So in order for us to replace the charging port, we have to remove the mid frame from the screen. So we're going to take off the battery first. Same thing with this. I'm just going to heat it up with my hot air gun, make it so that it's too hot to touch, and then slide, just kind of pry up with my pry tool, making sure not to slice underneath because the battery will rip and you'll have to replace it if it breaks open. Then I can take my playing cards and kind of slice through the adhesive underneath. Since it's not metal, the playing cards are a lot safer. Now the battery's off. Kind of interesting, you can see the date up here at the top of the battery. And so right here you can see the plastic frame pressed up against the screen. There's no glue along this little thin side. So I'm going to take my playing card and just slide it up underneath this spot and then heat up the bottom because there is glue holding the glass onto the plastic frame. Now I've taken my metal pry tool and slid it between the plastic and the glass, kind of where that button slides down between the two layers. Once they're separated, I can take my playing card and slide it between them to make sure they don't stick back together again. And then treat this the same way as you did the back of the phone, making sure it's consistently hot because as soon as it cools down, that adhesive is going to re-adhere and be really hard to separate. So be consistently heating up the plastic frame on the screen. And this is really hard as well. Make sure you do not bend the screen at all or the LCD will crack and you'll just need to buy a new screen. Here's the screen. It comes with the LCD, the glass, and the digitizer. They're all one piece. And so if you break one of those layers, either the glass or the LCD, you'll just have to replace the whole thing. I don't think a glass-only repair is possible with this phone. I would be very impressed if someone could do it. Now that the screen is off, I can work on the charging port. You can see that the buttons were just wrapped around that back plastic. So once they pry those off, the charging port comes loose from that plastic frame and you are good to go. I will link replacement charging ports and all the other parts down in the video description just like always. you can see that the home button as well can be replaced. It just slides through this back hole in the frame. Very, very similar to the Galaxy Note 4. Up here with the earpiece, just really quick, I'll show you how these come out. There's this little metal latch that pops up, and the earpiece and proximity sensor are all in one unit. So I'm going to unplug those and then slide them back in their little slots and pin them back down again. So to replace your new charging port, it will come with its own adhesive, usually, if you're not putting your same one back down again. So just pin those buttons back around in place, and then you can take your plastic and put it on top of the screen. New screens will also come with their own adhesive. If not, you can use that double-sided tape that I've put in the video description. You can see right here there is a little groove in that mid-frame that sits right underneath between the LCD and the glass layer, so make sure that it's lined up and it's not going to pinch against that when you press it down again. Now we can set the motherboard back into place, making sure to clip the charging port to the bottom of the motherboard first, and then you can take the rest of these ribbon cable connections and pin them back down where they came from. Pretty straightforward. Take the little wire cable connections and put them down into place as well, and the battery slips in on top of the mid-frame and plug that into the motherboard. I usually do that last so that there's no electricity coursing through the board while I'm working on it. It's a little bit safer way to do things. Then the back frame goes on, and then at this point you can turn the phone on because that power button is connected again with the two little contact points. Everything looks like it's working, so I'm going to put those 20 screws in place. And then if you buy a new rear back, it will come with its own adhesive, but since this is my old one, I'm just going to use the double-sided tape. Put that down, push the back into place, and everything works. If you have any questions, be sure to ask them in the comment section below. Make sure to watch the bin test video as well. I found that pretty interesting. Thanks a ton for watching. Hope this video helped you out, and don't forget to subscribe.